Today on the Nerdy Gritty, Activision recently confirmed their plan to release Call of Duty games every year. So we talk about the pros and cons of an annual franchise.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Nerdy Gritty, where we delve deep into the details of pop culture. I'm Dez.
And I'm Fox.
Fox, so, obviously, genuine tragedy, no jokes, real bad stuff. There are a couple of mass shootings recently.
Yes.
And this has once again brought up the debate on guns and gun control. And
Yes.
You and I have our opinions on that, but that's not what I want to talk about right now. This also has brought up the age-old solution of pointing at video games and blaming them for violence.
Yeah. This one with no motivation whatsoever, aside from just wanting to assign blame to something.
Right, just being able to blame something. And so, Wal-Mart decides they need to do something about this. The tragedy that has happened, something needs to be done about it. And so, to make sure with all this gun violence happening, that they are being wise and responsible with their product.
Right.
They took down their violent video game ads.
Yes.
But kept selling guns.
Yeah. I don't understand it.
It's weird. Anyway, Fox, what have you been up to, man?
So I saw a few movies this week. We went and saw, my wife and my mother-in-law and I went and saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
The newest Quentin Tarantino movie. Not shocking. It was freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
What you been up to?
Now, as far as movies go, when my mom was here when I was recovering from surgery, she came to help take care of the kids and whatnot. She was out yard selling one day and just found a copy of How to Train Your Dragon and just decided, sure, I'm gonna buy this.
And now your kids have seen it 400 times?
No, so we watched How to Train Your Dragon, and I think I loved it even more than the kids did. Like, the kids loved it and they thought it was great, but I'm like, man, this is a good movie. This is a really good movie. And so last night we watched How to Train Your Dragon 2. And it's also a really good movie. Like, typically, especially with animated sequels, you'll see a pretty heavy drop from the first to the second one.
Sure.
But this is like, they keep riding that board of, Metascores are high 70s, low 80s. They just keep going right in there. And I'm really excited to see How to Train Your Dragon 3.
Quick quiz related to animated movies.
Okay.
Angry Birds movie 2 came out recently.
Uh-huh.
I want you to, I'm going to give you 3 guesses as to the Rotten Tomatoes score for it.
The Rotten Tomatoes, not audience, right?
Yeah, just the Rotten Tomatoes score.
40%.
No. I'm not even going to tell you higher or lower.
Okay. 20%.
No.
Then I'm going to go the other way, and I'm going to go 78%.
82%.
Anything else you've been up to?
Yeah, I watched another movie. So we watched Once Upon a Time, and we were talking, or I just mentioned as we were talking about it, I was like, well, the only Quentin Tarantino movie I haven't seen now is Jackie Brown. And so we rented Jackie Brown and watched Jackie Brown. And it was also, Quentin Tarantino, over the 9 movies that have been like his directorial vision, he's like directed and produced a lot of other stuff, but he's made 9 movies. He obviously hasn't made a bad one. And Jackie Brown would probably be my least favorite because I felt like it was a little too long for the subject matter, but it was also really great.
I'd said last time that I had started to try and read the Mist books, the first of the Mist books,
right?
And I got a chapter in, and it just went way too hard on sci-fi for me.
Yep.
And so I set that down, and I was wondering what to read next and which way I want to go, because me not like having a book to read at the time.
I don't know if you remember this, but you said you were going to start reading the Dresden Files again.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
remember.
okay.
I don't remember saying that before.
Okay, no, you did.
Did I say why?
Read the short stories, then saw that Jim Butcher had apparently
that
finished
it's the end.
Start reading them again.
Yeah, so I'm starting over again. I'm telling you again.
Your brain is falling apart.
That was very, very old. I've been My brain's been falling apart for a really long time.
It's true.
So yeah, I finished Briefcases, and there are a lot of really good stories in there. Briefcases does a really cool job. Not Briefcases. No, this is Briefcases. Yes, there are two. Side Jobs is one, and Briefcases is the other. And this was
Okay.
Briefcases. Anyway, Briefcases focuses on side characters. Like probably 50% of the short stories in there are about not Harry Dresden.
Gotcha.
And it's really cool. And the Dresden Files itself does a really good job of taking these characters and starting them as regular, normal people, then introducing them to the spiritual world and the supernatural world and whatnot, and then having them respond normally as you would,
Right.
and then having them grow accustomed to it over the course of like 4 books. Like they really do take their time with them becoming accustomed to things. So, like one of them, Butters, has just kind of been a helper, like a doctor to them for like almost all of the books. I think he came out in the second book, and just recently he became like he's called Knight of the Crosses. Spoiler alert if you're not this far in the Dresden books yet, but he became one of the 3 Knights of the Cross. And again, he just started out as like this really nerdy uh, uh, coroner, medical examiner, whatever it is that does. He has a doctorate, but he does dead bodies. That's the
Okay.
one. And he would help them with things like that, and then seeing him like his character grow over the course of all of the books, it's really cool. And they
All right.
introduce other characters like Molly. They introduce her as like a 12-year-old, and now she's in her mid-20s, and she's the lady of fairy of the Winter Court. So she's just gained like this immense power over
Yeah,
time.
that's
Things like
that's
that.
quite the change.
Yeah, but again, that's over the course of so many books. So
Yeah.
it's been really cool. And then there were a lot of short stories about them and how they're dealing with these things. So yeah, it was really cool.
All right. Yeah. You gave me the adventure. I gave you the Adventure Zone graphic novel for your birthday or something.
Yeah.
Then you read it and gave it to me a while ago to read it, and I finally just finished it yesterday.
Nice.
And unrelated, like I just happened to start listening to the Adventure Zone yesterday, the first like
The Balance
episode.
arc?
What?
Episode 1 of Balance?
Episode 1
Wow.
of like basically where the graphic novel starts.
Okay, yeah, that's Balance.
And like, the Adventure Zone is fun to listen to. I mean, I'm excited for them to get more into a stride of getting better at, just making it more fluid. But the graphic novel was really fun.
Here's what I'll say about the podcast itself. The first few episodes, it's almost like a TV show where it's like you got to get through the first season.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? The first few episodes, they had never played D&D before.
Most of them, yeah.
Only one of them had, I think. But eventually, they really get into a stride. And I think the graphic novel really makes those first few rocky episodes feel like the rest of the entire series. Where once they get into their stride and once they become comfortable with balancing comedy with story, Griffin's a fantastic story writer and teller. He and Matt Mercer, to me, are like these unsung story writers of our generation that are just phenomenal, like over the top phenomenal. And like, I'm not kidding, probably 4 or 5 episodes throughout the whole thing made me cry in the Balance arc. And it's
really?
Oh, it's so good. The story is beautiful, it's incredible. And then Griffin really focuses on the story, but then he allows the other 3 to use comedy when they want to.
Sure, yeah.
And so he's not trying to push this to be a comedy podcast, but he's letting them be comedic when they want to be. And so it becomes really well balanced throughout the rest of it, and it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it did make me want to start writing a D&D campaign, which I always want to. I always have like, that's a cool idea, and then I never do. But it makes me want to write and play another D&D campaign as I'm reading it. So,
speaking of D&D, just am 2 sessions into a new campaign. I was DMing for a while, but with my injury, and now just with me still being injured, like recovering, and also being super busy just with camp coming up and all kinds of things. Anyway,
right.
We've taken a break from me DMing, and my friend Daniel's decided to DM for a while, the Salt Marsh like whole campaign. So this actually may last a while. I am playing a barbarian for the first time in my life. I've been playing D&D for probably 15 years now, would be my guess. And first time in my life, I'm playing a barbarian.
That's all I've got to talk about.
That's all I've got to talk about. So let's get down to the nerdy gritty.
Let's do.
Hey, but first, if you're listening to this right now, if you're hearing this, we want to let you know that what you heard before this is an edited version of what we put up for our patrons. If you really enjoyed listening to us talk kind of briefly about some of the things we've been up to, some of those nerd things that we really enjoy, books we're reading, movies we're watching, things like that, then you can check out the entire version, the director's cut of our podcast on Patreon. For our upper two tiers, the patrons get unedited podcasts and also all of our Patreon exclusive content. Or if you cannot do the second or third tier, even at the first tier, you do just get all of the Patreon exclusive content. You don't get the podcast, but things like our entire playthrough of Cadence of Hyrule's up right now. Fox is doing a Final Fantasy X stuff right now. And so it's really, really awesome to have things like that. We just had somebody up their donations to $20 a month, and that was fantastic because for us, that's so much money compared to
it really is.
things before. Yeah. So thank you very much. And if you would really love to go out there and help us out, we'd really, really appreciate it. Your funds help us make this podcast, do our YouTube videos, go to PAX and things like that.
Coming soon.
So coming soon. So if you can head over to patreon.com/dezandfox, we'd really appreciate your support. If that's not something you can do, we absolutely understand. We love it when you listen to this, when you like it, when you comment, and especially when you share it or when you rate it on your podcast, device.
Wherever you're listening.
We really, really appreciate those things. Thank you again, guys, for listening. Let's continue on to the nerdy gritty. So recently, Activision? No.
Yes, Activision.
Yes, Activision, the makers of Call of Duty, decided, you know what? Just so you guys know, we're going to announce we're going to come out with a Call of Duty every single year.
Yes.
It's going to be a new Call of Duty every year. And so this has got Fox and I thinking, what are the pros and cons of an annual release? If you're going to be, what's the other one that we talked about? Assassin's Creed.
Assassin's Creed. I mean, a lot of sports games do it, but especially Madden. So
Call of Duty.
We want to talk about kind of how can that be a good thing and how has it shown in the past and how could it be not a great plan? So here's just a little backstory on Call of Duty. So this is basically continuing like how they've done it for a while now. Right. And how Activision is the publisher. Activision is like the owner of the whole thing. Whereas two different studios, I believe they are Infinity Ward and Treyarch, they basically alternate between making new Call of Duty games. So it's not just one studio shoving one out every year. They kind of take turns, and that way they get a closer to typical development cycle for each. That's been kind of true for like Assassin's Creed when they used to do this. It was all Ubisoft studios, but there was like, Ubisoft Montreal, Ubisoft wherever. Like they're different studios around the world.
Right.
Because they're a bigger company and have all these different studios. And then Madden, I don't even know anything about Madden, but that was a little different.
They just copy and paste new faces on the guys and then release it again. A little bit.
Now that's a little unfair. They introduce new modes and new kind of mechanics to the game and stuff. But yeah, so let's talk about. I mean, we can at the end say, yes or no, should you do this? But we want to talk about kind of more just what the benefit, what the negative is to doing this. So,
well, let's go backwards. Let's start with the bad and go to the good.
Okay, sure. Sounds great.
Yeah. So first of all, to me, when I think about an annual release, I immediately think about kind of like what you said. Your options are to bore a studio by having to make that game every single year.
Yes.
Or to possibly create some inconsistencies as you let it bounce around to different dev studios. Activision, if you guys know, is a publisher. They are not the actual makers of the game. And so when they bounce around, when they're sending this to different developers to be able to make this game, unless they are there like micromanaging every single piece of what's going to go on, that game's going to have a little bit of a spin on it, on however the devs that are currently working on it prefer to make games, the way they make games. And I can see that just having inconsistencies in the game. And when you're releasing a game annually, that can be kind of tough. If you're releasing it every other year, every 3 years, and then the mechanics are a little bit different, sure, okay, that's fine. But every year, you see that these games, there's kind of almost an expectation of consistency in the mechanics. I know how to play this game. It's the way this game works. It's
Right.
almost like the way, and this isn't an annual release, but it's almost like the way that Sekiro was very difficult for a lot of Dark Souls players
Yeah.
because it's just the mechanics were so different, but you went into it expecting Dark Souls mechanics.
Right. Yeah. Now I do know that Activision is pretty close to the development. Um. I it seems as I mean everybody has their okay. All right. 100% honesty time. I don't care about Call of Duty games.
Right.
I played the stories of Modern Warfare 1, 2, and 3 because my roommate had them or I just happened to have access to them at some point. And so I played through the stories really quick. They just the campaign mode. And that is the extent of my Call of Duty experience.
Right. That's
Really
even
in
more than
history.
me.
Even before like this new modern era of Call of Duty, even before that, and I played some of the oh dang it, what's the what was that other series? Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
I played some of the old Medal of Honor games a lot, but yeah. So my knowledge of these games specifically is not, at the peak. But I do know that they do keep it pretty consistent, especially as far as the multiplayer systems go. Now they have different modes and stuff like that. They have zombies in some of them and not in the others and all these kind of things. But yeah, to me, the inconsistency would more come in like possibly the quality of the game. Not necessarily like story wise, they kind of follow different arcs or different like characters and stuff. So stories you may have that, but to me, the quality, like, I'm sure there are people out there. I'm sure everybody has like, oh, I like the Infinity Ward games that, Call of Duty games. I like those ones more than the Treyarch games. And to me, what that does is, it's because of these multiplayer mechanics that I really like, or I think the shooting is more responsive, or it's more realistic, or whatever in these games. So what it does is kind of by default mean that half your audience theoretically is just not excited for half the games you put out.
Right.
Because you're having an entirely different studio create that game. Now you can have a lot of oversight on that, art assets and all that, but I feel like just by default, if an entirely different studio is creating the game, then yeah, you're going to create some inconsistencies with very specific, like, mechanics, like Twitch mechanics and all that kind of stuff, which are super important in a multiplayer shooter. People care about that to the nth degree. And so I think you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit if you decide we're going to pump out these games every year and just have a different studio do it each year. Because if one of those studios does it a way, not even necessarily worse, but just a way that half your audience doesn't like as much as the other half, then automatically they are not excited for that.
See, I even think, especially with Call of Duty, that they're missing a different opportunity here, that they are doing this and missing the free-to-play opportunity. With a game like Call of Duty, I think it would be really beneficial to them to have a free-to-play game that's multiplayer only, then have subscriptions that allow you premium maps, or like only, you can only get in the really upper tier levels, or really upper tier multiplayer. What's the word I'm looking for? Servers, multiplayer servers.
Okay. Yeah.
If you are a subscriber, if not, you're going to play with a bunch of noobs or whatever else. Just all these different things that, look, you can go in and you can play Call of Duty whenever you want multiplayer for free. But if you want to play it like with just your friends, if you want to have your own server, if you want the high tier servers,
or the
if you
pros,
want, the pro things like that, then you got to give us a monthly subscription. And then on top of that, they could release the story pack every year, and they could make it a $40 download for a story pack every single year. And at that point, if you're going, let's say $5 a month, that's $60 a year. And then if they want the story, they're going to pay you another $40 for the story on top of that.
Right.
And to me, for a game like Call of Duty, that at least to me is pretty much the same every single year with some small things changed.
Right.
The amount of things that change could very easily be just put in on a new update or some new DLC or something like that. And at that point, you could microcharge people for it. And I think that would be beneficial to both fan and to studio, because fans at that point could get all the Call of Duty that they want. Do you not want? I might play Call of Duty at that point. I might jump in and be like, "Look, it's free. I'll play it. I'll try it out. Might as well try it out." You know what I
Sure.
mean? For a guy who's never played one in my life, if you were saying, "Hey, I do want to try this," I'd say, "Hey, I'll play with you. Sure, why not?" Sort of like Wolfenstein. I never would have played a Wolfenstein game if it weren't for co-op and Youngblood. And
Right.
now here we are, and we're
Right.
recording that now. And so we're in this situation here where they have an opportunity to bring in new fans as well as very high tier fans. They'll easily, it's $60 for $5 a month. That's $60. That's how much they're going to spend on the game anyway. They're prepared to give you that,
Yeah.
and probably even more people will give you that than normally would anyway. So to me, this is almost a missed opportunity of them reskinning the same game or a similar game, even reskinning it and adding some new story stuff, and then releasing it where they could be in a free to play place, charging monthly or letting people play for free, and then just charging a DLC story mode every single year.
Yeah. Other cons that we can see from other games like this in the past, I'm going to go with Assassin's Creed.
Yes.
I love the Assassin's Creed series. That was, I think, the first game I bought when I got an Xbox 360. Like the first generation when they had, I went in and I said, I want Assassin's Creed. I also bought a game called Lost Odyssey. That was really great too. But I bought Assassin's Creed because I loved the whole open world aspect and just the cool, like, assassin kind of thing. And it was a great game. Assassin's Creed 2 came out, and it, like, Assassin's Creed 1 was basically after a few more came out, it kind of felt like a proof of technology, a proof of concept. And then Assassin's Creed 2 came out, and it was an improvement in any way. It was an incredible sequel. It was a great game and a great sequel because it just took everything you loved about the old game and made it better. And then Assassin's Creed 3 came out, and it was less good. And then
Mm-hmm.
Assassin's Creed 4 came out, and it was really fun. The whole pirate ship thing was
Black
really
Flag.
fun.
Yeah.
And then Assassin's Creed whatever came out, Rogue, or I don't even remember what they're called after that. Uh and they started doing this yearly thing. And it made the series lose its appeal to me
Mm.
because it just said this is the next one. I am very much looking forward to Last of Us Part 2. It has been what, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7 years since the first one came out. It's been a good long while.
Right.
Years and years. And I don't know when Last of Us Part 2 will come out. I expect next year sometime, but I don't know. But the
6 years.
fact that
It's Last
what's
of
that?
Us. 6 years.
6 years since the last one, and the Last of Us, and the second one is coming out at some point. And I will tell you that if 6 years ago was just the first one, and next year is Last of Us Part 7, it would not have anywhere near the hype that it would have.
Absolutely.
Even if they were continued quality, because when it becomes just the standard normal event every year, then it loses its specialness. It loses its unique quality. And so with Assassin's Creed, we see that where they just came out and announced, like, hey, we're going to stop doing this, and it's going to be a little longer before the next Assassin's Creed came out. And I think it was actually only 2 years, which is still a very fast development time, between games at least. I'm sure they were working on it before. It was more than 2 years development, but as far as game release dates go, then they came out with Assassin's Creed Origins. And it was, as far as the series go, it's one of the highlights.
Right.
Because it wasn't just another Assassin's Creed. They took the idea, said, how can we do something different? How can we do something possibly better, depending on your, choice, your preference? But how can we improve upon the what we've done for so long? And waiting longer to get the game was very much worth it because it meant it was a better game. When you have a longer development time, often, not always, it usually means a highly polished game, and just a better experience. That's not always true. Duke Nukem Forever, and hot take, Final Fantasy 15. But It's you need more time, I think, to create a quality experience rather than just putting out a new. This one's in the French Revolution. This one's in Victorian London.
Right.
This one's. It's just like, oh, okay, that's where that one is. Like, it just becomes less interesting, and therefore I'm less inclined to play it.
Yeah, unless it's a fighting game in which you can add new fighters or whatever else.
Well, sure.
That is kind of understandable. Other than that, it becomes pretty samey, and especially people just start thinking of your game as it's just one of those games. It's one of those
Just,
annual releases,
just the new one.
and it all just becomes kind of humdrum at that
Yeah.
point. Instead of the hype that comes out for games like God of War or Kingdom Hearts 3, when they're like, that franchise has been quiet for such a long time, and now it's releasing, and the hype that builds up for that. And so you end up coming up with a game that there's no hype, there's no excitement for, and probably I'd actually say in the studios as well. Like I I can't imagine being forced to make the same game over and over and over again, but still try and keep your artistic integrity through that. You and I talk a lot about how video games are art, and I'm not going to try and bash and say Call of Duty is not art. A lot of people, a lot of artists, a lot of devs,
By
things like that.
definition, is.
It is. I'm absolutely not going to say that. But what I am going to say is, when you're forced to produce that every single year, you lose some artistic integrity in that. And my example of that is especially not the Dresden Files, the Drizzt Do'Urden books, the Forgotten Realms books. Those were an annual release for a really long time, and I've read them all, and I love them all, but I am ready for Drizzt Do'Urden to die. I am ready for this to be over. I'm ready for it to be done, because as much as I love these characters, there's only so many times you can tell the same story. There's only so many times you can go through the same thing. The Dresden Files, on the other hand, Jim Butcher has always kind of taken his time in between books and made sure how long he needs. And now that I see the end coming, I don't want that to happen. I'm like, no, always Dresden forever. I love these characters too much, because he's taken his time to build this artistic thing instead of being forced from a publisher to come out with an annual thing. And so being an artist, having a publisher looming over you and saying you need to release every single year, at some point, I guarantee you they're going to say, man, I'm just not feeling it right now, but I have to. So this is no longer art. This is work for me. And I'm just going to drudge this out. And I'm just going to do what I need to do to make sure this part gets done, because it needs to get done. I have to rush through this.
Yeah. It becomes no longer art, more than the product, the next version of the product.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk more about like Madden, where even like we have a friend or a student in the youth group who we were talking to about Madden at one point, and he's like, I don't think they need to keep making them, but I keep buying them because then it has all the new stats or whatever.
Right.
And it just feels like it's also like you lost your integrity as far as like you just kind of addicting somebody to something. A little bit, I would say. Same with games like Fortnite, where, if you don't pay us for the next thing, then you're going to be out of touch and you're not going to be up with so you need to give us the money for the next one. Whereas if your goal is just money, then, I mean, there are plenty of examples of like Red Dead Redemption 2. It's the second one in the series. The first one came out years and years ago, 8 years ago or something. And the second one is now one of the highest selling video games of all time. Hundreds and hundreds. It made like $800 million in its like before it even came out, like in pre-order sales. So I would advise, like, almost in every single way, you can do better than just a yearly release schedule if you take the time and effort to make a quality piece of art rather than the next product that people will feel obligated to purchase. So let's move on though. Positives. What good can come out of doing a yearly release schedule?
As a consumer, this is not so much of a positive, but as the publisher and the devs and whatever else, this is kind of a positive here, in that you and I have talked a lot about how fantastic games are, like Last of Us, for example.
Yeah.
Let's pretend Last of Us 2 makes X amount of dollars. It's a lot of money because people are hyped about it and it comes out. It's been 6 years since the last release. Let's pretend Last of Us 2 comes out at around the same time as the new Call of Duty comes out, and the Call of Duty, let's say, makes half of that.
Yeah, okay.
Half. Yeah, but guess what? 6 years in between one
That's
to
a
the
good point.
other, half each year, that's still 3 times as much money over those years as Last of Us made that one
Yeah.
year.
That's a good point right there.
So that's a lot of money that you're going to get to be bringing in. If it's not much, it's almost quantity over quality at that point.
Yeah.
If you can take the same engine, a lot of the same assets, you get a small dev team to kind of reskin some stuff and some new writers to add some new things in there, and then you re-release the game on a pretty tight budget, but then it makes a good amount of money.
Right.
When you're making a good amount of money every single year, that begins to add up. And I think Call of Duty it could very easily go with that route.
Sure.
Small dev team, same assets, same engine, reskin some things, get a couple new writers in there, re-release, make a crap ton of money on a really small budget, and just do the exact same thing every single year. And at that point, for the consumers, that's not as great, obviously. I mean,
no,
it's great in
as much as a negative.
And for us at that point, it's just kind of you can play it if you want, or maybe you don't want. But for them, they then can take those profits and they can even turn it into something else. Maybe Activision profits does get put into some other games that are going to be really great, or expanding their studios, or paying their devs more. You know what I mean? Maybe it is a small dev team that's just reskinning, but they pay them more now because, hey, we've got this profit, we've got this percentage, we want to give you some of that. Sure. And so it can work out and a benefit on the business side of things for sure.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily see that as a that's a pro for some people.
Yes.
And I guess at the end of the day, 0 Game of the Year awards versus 100 Game of the Year awards equals the same amount of money from those awards. So that's a good point. It's definitely a negative when it comes to games as an art form, but
yes, absolutely.
For me, a pro, I mean, if you like the Assassin's Creed series, it had its low points and it had its high points, but a game every year means more content, means more for you to play. Like, I mean, am I okay with waiting 6 years for Last of Us Part 2? Yes. Would I be lying if I said I wanted more Last of Us games to come, or I didn't want more Last of Us games to come out? Yes, I'd be lying. I want to play more Last of Us games based on the quality. Now, this is kind of a catch-22 because it often is the case that the more that comes out, the less quality those games are, and so it's kind of biting yourself. But like at the end of the day, more doesn't necessarily mean worse.
Right.
Yeah, if you have a team that is like really honing their craft and continually trying to create something new, it's really about where they put their focus. Is it just about pumping out more content, or is it about creating high quality content just on a faster schedule than others? Then I think this is all it can be great for us because it means we get to play more games. So there's definitely a potential for a high quality Call of Duty game every single year. If you're into that, to me, a low quality Call of Duty game and a high quality Call of Duty game are essentially the same thing, but that's only because I don't play them. It's not my jam. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's hard to complain that there's going to be more of a game because that we can't automatically say that will be less good of a game.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially under the phrasing, there is no bad publicity.
Yeah.
Your name gets out there every year, whether it's you and I saying, man, they just release the same thing every year, blah, 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 yada, yada, wine, or if it's people who really love it, your name's out there every single year. When Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, a lot of people were like, wait, isn't that old game? Wait,
yes.
Hold on.
There's a whole generation that doesn't know what it is.
Right. And so you get to this point where you've waited so long that people are kind of forgetting. I guarantee you that there are some people who played and enjoyed Last of Us, but thought it was fine, that may not know Last of Us 2 is coming out, or maybe they heard it and they're like, cool, whatever, that game was fine. If it had come out immediately afterward, the next year, they may have gone and bought it because they still
Yeah.
had that energy, that mindset. But when you have time to forget, you also have time to not care as much. And so you get to a point where you're like, whatever. Maybe I'll get it, maybe not, because too much time has passed. But when you're there every single year, your name, your title, everything you're doing is staying in people's head, and people get a lot more hyped for that. People get a lot more excited when they can see that name more often.
Yeah, that's a good point. The problem here is that all these pros just kind of seem more meta, not necessarily even pros for the consumer, more pros for the developer.
Right.
And so, I mean, as an art first proponent of the game industry, like I want to see quality over more. Then it's hard for me to come up with like why I want another. Oh man, Cyberpunk is coming out in March. Really hoping that they start doing every year because I don't see
Right.
that as having a history of quality productions. More just middling to just fine or even worse.
But people that play these types of games like Call of Duty or Madden, they're not expecting a brand new artistic experience. They're expecting a good, solid shooter or a good,
Yeah.
solid sports game that has the newest, most modern,
See,
equipment or things in there. And if that's what you want, give it to them. Go ahead.
that exactly right there is what I think what one of the big positives actually is it's really great for esports
Oh yeah,
because it keeps the content like if you are not a player of the game, watching it can be very exciting. But if like watching every year the tournament has these new characters, has these new modes or whatever, has new content in it, then it becomes more interesting. It's not just like watching somebody who's like, okay, this guy was the best last year at this, but since then they've come out with 5 new characters or this new mode, and now we get to see who's the best in that mode or whatever. Like it just continually increases the interest level that I would have in watching esports.
or even new weapons to balance the meta. This
Sure.
one weapon has a high DPS and a good long range firing, and that's kind of a standard weapon for a lot of people. Cool, we're going to release a different an armor that really reduces the damage on that weapon, and now the meta changes,
Right.
and but it's a new release thing, that's the next game. And so
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you who were fantastic with that one weapon, you got to stop and you got to train in something else right now. And continuing to balance the meta, exactly like you said, really helps esports, but also helps casual players who just like, man, I keep getting ruined by this thing. And then you go on Reddit or whatever and they say, hey, it's cool, here's this other thing that will help balance that.
Yeah.
And so new releases and new content coming out like that really helps balance those things.
Right. Absolutely.
All right, Fox. So we've talked about pros, we've talked about cons. Give me your final thoughts. Just one big thing. Are you for or are you against it, and why? Go.
I'd have to say largely I'm against it. It forces this art form to become more about the product and more about the profit rather than the quality, integrity of the art form. And so I'm usually going to be against that. I won't say that it inherently, like I might have actually just used that word. I won't say that it always is going to make the next one worse, but I will say it does not lend itself toward being better. And at the end of the day, if you're not making something better or something that like improves upon what you thought of it or just the quality of whatever, then you really shouldn't be making it. Because at that point, you're just making another one.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm gonna have to say, that's a no from me, dog. Activision, stop it. But also, whatever. I don't play them anyway. Who cares?
I would say I'm an against plus.
Oh,
Yeah. So as far as just being a hard video game release every single year, I'm against it for all the same reasons. Just the artistic value of games and the story that can be told in this really unique medium in which you are directly interacting with the story. That just does not lend to an annual release.
No.
For there to be really good art, give the people the time that they need to make that really good art. That might be 2 years, that might be 5 years, that might be 14 years, cough, cough, Kingdom Hearts. And so you give the people the time they need, the devs the time they need to make quality art, to make a quality game. But there is a genre of video game in which they have just said, hey, we're here for the gameplay. We're really not shooting for high art here. We're shooting for fun. And high art's not our goal. It's going to be artistic, obviously. It's an art form. But that's not our goal. Our goal is a lot of fun. And that is free to play. You look at Fortnite, you look at Apex or PUBG or whatever else. If Call of Duty, if Madden went free to play, but they just charged you monthly, or you had to pay for the updates each year. It's a $10 update each year for the new players, things like that. And then all kinds of new skins, all kinds of new helmet. You can make all of their alternative uniforms in Madden, pay stuff. Maybe you get like classic teams. You could pay for classic teams, things like that. All of these things are opportunities in an area where, look, you're kind of doing the same thing already anyway. You want to balance that meta? Release a DLC. Don't release a brand new game. Just release a DLC real quick. You want to change the players into the teams they are? Release a DLC. Or even just make that an update. Changing your mechanics every year almost feels like we have to, because we can't just release the exact same game. You know, it seems like there is just okay, we're going to add, I don't know, this, because we don't want to release the exact same thing. Now you have this opportunity, like, again, in Madden, maybe there is a campaign mode, but you got to pay for that. It's $40 for the campaign mode. If you just want to go in and play some Madden against some other people, that's free to play. But if you want to go in, you want to take your character, you want to take them from the NCAA all the way through the NFL, that costs money and you got to pay for that. But if you just want to go in and play some Madden, free to play. If you just want to go in and play some multiplayer Call of Duty, go shoot, man. Because free to play is a genre that really lends to the, hey, we're not really here for the high art form. Yeah. We're here for you to have some fun. And those games feel like the same thing for me. They feel exactly like, we're not here for the high art form. We're here for you guys to be able to play Madden or play Call of Duty. And so if these games decided one day, you know what, we're going to go free to play, I would say, hey, I'm for that. Give me an opportunity to try it out if I want to. And if I don't like it, whatever. But all the hardcore players, they're still going to be loyal to you. They can still play Madden. You're not going to make less money off of them. They're going to be there. You probably make more money off of them. So it all balances out in this way that helps them not have to make a brand new game every year, helps us be able to try things out, and helps the hardcore players be able to get exactly what they want from the game. I think free-to-play is a really, really good option for these companies.
It is a little shocking that they're not going that way. It's a little surprising. Games as a service is here to stay. So it's weird that
absolutely
Call of Duty feels like it should lend itself to that. So yeah, interesting. I predict we'll see that probably in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think so too. I'd say even Madden more than Call of Duty.
Yeah, never really thought about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. Let us know what you think about our ideas, our pros and cons. Let us know if you have any pros and cons of an annual release that we didn't bring up. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your opinions. And let us know how good you think Fox's beard is. You can look at, he has some face cam on YouTube, or on Twitch.
I mean, that's true. You can't see it right now, but.
No, right now, but you can go on YouTube or you can watch him on Twitch and you can see his beard. It's pretty majestic if you guys didn't know that.
No, it's kind of bad right now.
Thanks again, guys. And always remember that saved games save lives.
See you next week.